Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist and I'm an author of the book How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
You probably know the feeling. Sweaty, fast breathing, quick heart rate. That's a cortisol spike. It feels awful, and its imbalance is the cause of your anxiety. Rebalance Health's 3-part anxiety system helps address it at the root. Rebalance Health lozenges are natural and designed for optimal absorption, providing 24-hour relief. Live life fully without feeling like you're fighting for it. Get 50% off your first month with code CALM23 at rebalancehealth.com.
Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
Hey guys, what is crack-a-lackin'? I'm Elena Grace, and welcome to I've Been Thinking. This week, we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic, I think, especially if you are interested at all in the environment or in clothing or both. We are going to be discussing kind of the ethics, I guess, of buying new versus buying vintage, and some of the nuances to that honestly I hadn't even considered until very recently. But first, I do want to do a little bit of business. Still haven't decided on next month's book club, which is horrible of me. I'm trying really hard to pick something good and something a little bit different than what we've been reading and talking about. So bear with me. It'll take me just another minute. I think actually that's it. Other than that, please do just go make sure that if you have an iPhone or you listen on Apple Podcasts, go leave us a rating and a review, please. 5 stars. Please, please, please. That would be so helpful. Other than that, though, there's nothing really to address. So let's just go ahead and jump on in. Now, I love clothes. I love dressing up, looking cute, whatever. Even when I'm just hanging around the house, I feel so much better about myself and my day if I at least put on something that resembles an outfit, you know, even if it's just like shorts and a sports bra, or like leggings and some kind of t-shirt that like isn't a trash t-shirt, you know, something like that. That makes me feel so much better about myself. And I am very particular to a certain extent of how I present myself. I'm pretty laid back in a lot of ways, but I like to look nice, you know, and I think that a lot of us do, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So I have been thinking a lot recently about the fashion industry, and recently it came to my attention that some things that I had always thought were like advances, I guess, in fashion, such as it becoming really trendy to buy vintage, I was like, oh, well, that's great. That's more sustainable. And it is. But there are some problems there too, actually. So I wanted to share with you guys about this and talk to you all, kind of get your feelings on it on the Instagram, get some feedback from you all about this. But anyway, let's go. So as for buying new clothing, whatever, the fashion industry as a whole, I did not realize this, creates about 10% of the world's carbon emissions. It is the second largest consumer of water, which is crazy, and it contributes significantly to microplastics found in the ocean. And that's because a lot of fabrics, when they're washed, release microplastics. In addition, around 85% of textiles go to the dump every year. Our consumption is not slowing either, and in fact, it's actually continuing to grow. So fast fashion is probably the most talked about issue in the fashion industry, right? That's something that we all know what it's talking about. We all have heard about it being talked about as a problem. Fast fashion is affordable, which is especially important for those of a lower socioeconomic status. Often, though certainly not always, this includes minority communities. It's also trendy, which is important for middle schoolers through college-age girls and even older, looking for cheap clothes that they don't care so much if they get ruined on a Friday night. I definitely had my go-to outfits for the frat parties back in the day, especially like a cheap Forever 21 top that was cute, but it wasn't expensive. So if somebody spilled hooch down the front of it, I wasn't mad. I could just say, oh, well, it was $10 and move on. It was affordable for me, especially because I didn't have a job in college. I was very blessed that my parents handled college and my expenses for me, and it was easily replaced. But I didn't really realize that there could be things wrong with that. Like, I knew that it wasn't high quality, but I never ever considered the implications of my cheap t-shirt and what those implications were on the environment and even on people's lives. So I'm going to hit you with a few fast facts to put fast fashion into context for you. And most of these revolve around the environment, but keep in mind that these are just like skimming the surface. These were things that I thought were really important to recognize. But because I didn't want to dwell on this for too long, but I wanted to establish this fact. So I don't even get into like the human side of this. This is only environment for these fast facts. So clothing production has roughly doubled since the year 2000. In 2014, people bought about 60% more clothing than in 2000, but only kept those clothes half as long. European fashion companies, on average, offered 2 collections a year in 2000. In 2011, they were offering an average of 5. Many brands will offer even more, though. Zara, H&M, Kendra Scott, etc. will have multiple seasonal collections, like Spring 1, Spring 2, Resort, whatever. And that's not even to mention smaller companies who, even though they operate on a smaller level, they'll have drops every few weeks to refresh the stock. And they're still purchasing a lot of the time from those fast fashion producers. The equivalent of 1 garbage truck full of clothes is burned or dumped in a landfill every second. Certain clothes, when washed, release microplastics into the water and thus into the ocean, equaling around 50 billion water bottles worth every year. Y'all, that makes me sick. I do not drink from plastic water bottles. I don't use straws most of the time. I really try to limit my plastic consumption very heavily. And the fact that my clothes contribute, oh, I die. Polyester requires 2 to 3 more times carbon emissions than producing cotton. And polyester won't break down, which is bad. A 2017 report estimated that around 35% of the microplastics in the ocean came from polyester. As I mentioned, the fashion industry contributes 10% of the world's carbon emissions. That's more than international air travel and maritime shipping combined. Combined, friends. The 10% share of carbon that the fashion industry contributes is expected to jump to around 25% by 2050 if fashion continues on its current trajectory. Also, as I mentioned, fashion's impact on water. One cotton skirt requires 700 gallons of water to produce, which is enough for one person to be fully hydrated, like 8 cups of water a day, every day for 3.5 years. One pair of jeans takes 2,000 gallons, which is enough for 10 years worth of water. I've seen a lot of brands putting on their websites and even attaching to their jeans and stuff sometimes. I think Levi's does this. You know, this only took this much water to produce, which is awesome that they are aware of that and, you know, whatever. But is it really being addressed? Just a question. And also, like, if you Google that, if you start looking up about, you know, cotton and how much water it takes to be produced, first of all, you will see, like, how much water it takes to grow cotton. You will see there is a lake, I forget where it is now, it's like somewhere in Western Europe, I think, and the entire lake has been dried up almost since 2000 because of an increase in growing cotton in the region. Or what? And also, if you think about it, there are countries where there are places in America where the people don't have clean water. They don't have any water in some places, in some countries, and our jeans take enough water for a person there to drink water for 10 years. Oh my gosh, it's overwhelming. Okay. Textile dyeing is the world's second largest source of water pollution and utilizes 2 million Olympic-sized pools of water per year. Like, okay. Yeah. So that's that on fast fashion. So these facts, like I said, I wanted to put fast fashion and fashion in general into a little bit of a better context for you, at least environmentally. Like I said, I did not even dip into what goes on with people in relation to that. So this will give you some perspective on why shopping vintage is so important and it's much more sustainable. You know, if you think about it, a lot of the time vintage is higher quality. Even though it's older and often used, it has lasted all this time for a reason. And, you know, they didn't use foreign sweatshops and low quality materials back then the way we do now. A lot of that stuff is just significantly better quality than the things you'd find in a store today. Vintage is also much more unique. So you'd be hard up to find yourself wearing the same thing as the girl a few tables down on date night or at the club if you shop vintage versus shopping at Forever 21 or even at Macy's. Don't get me wrong, I love Macy's. but so does everyone else, you know? But even as I argue for shopping vintage, I would be remiss if I did not recognize that the increasing popularity of buying vintage is increasing the prices of buying vintage. The demand goes up, so the price goes up, you know? They realize that they have a stronger market for it. So that means that the biggest issue with buying secondhand is that those who do rely on secondhand clothing to dress themselves are now being forced out of that industry that was integral to their basic survival, essentially. They now can't afford a lot of the clothing that was in their budget before, and this means that many are then forced into buying fast fashion, which, if they can afford it, which, as we've said, is not sustainable and it's not quality clothing. So they're going to be buying it more often versus buying, just a few good things up front. So in that sense, it does become a bit of a catch-22. We buy vintage in an attempt to be sustainable, but then that puts those who are less financially able in the spot of having to then participate in fast fashion if they can even afford it. Which leads to the question of, what do we do then? So I would argue that one of the biggest factors here is just limiting our consumption. There is nothing wrong, y'all, with being seen wearing the same top multiple times. I have to fight this really hard to this day. My whole life I've had this fear. Who knows where I got it from? Honestly, probably my mother, but I'm sorry, Mommy, but it's true. Of wearing an outfit and somebody remembering it and calling me out on it. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm broken. But Taylor, my roommate, she actually asked me last week if bike shorts were the only thing that I would wear to the chiropractor because I've worn them there the last 2 times. And I was shook because I'm always trying to convince myself that nobody notices those things. And like in my head, I'm like, oh man, I wore this same shirt to the chiropractor 4 months ago. They're going to think this is the only shirt I own. No, Elena. But then Taylor goes and does that, and I'm like, well, crap, that's a setback. She was just giving me crap because she's my sister, and I know that. But you have to realize that it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they think that all I wear is bike shorts. It doesn't matter if Adam makes fun of me because I really love this one shirt and I wear it all the time. He does it too. He just doesn't realize it. It doesn't matter. And I also want to say, don't think that I don't find myself participating in, the fashion industry. I still buy clothes. Clothes and food are probably 2 of my biggest weaknesses. And plants. And books. But anyway, I love a good new outfit. I think that having good staple pieces are really important and some killer statement pieces. That's really important too. I love being on trend, but I have become increasingly mindful of a handful of things, and it has made shopping a different kind of experience for me lately. So, 1, where am I spending my money at? Is this a small store or a local store? Is it immediately affecting somebody's life, or is it a big brand that if I choose not to shop there, it's not going to kill them? I try really hard to be mindful of this. Why should I shop with that store? What service are they providing? Am I physically helping somebody? That kind of thing. Where do their clothes come from? Number 2, where do their clothes come from? I try really hard to be mindful of this, and I can't say that I always achieve it. I most certainly do not. But I want to make sure that the clothing I spend money on supports people rather than contributing to sweatshops and people who don't make a living wage. Again, I can't say that I always make the best informed decisions on that note, but I do try, and I try to be aware of it. And 3, what kind of impact does this company have on the earth? Do they use recycled or biodegradable shipping materials? Do they use recycled plastic or recycled fabric for their clothing? Do they somehow offset emissions? Again, like I said, I'm far from perfect, but I try to choose stores based on as much as of this criteria as possible, because I know that these little things are the things that make the difference in the long run. And if we continually make decisions based off of these factors, then it will create a change. It will. And if we show that these are things that we are genuinely concerned about, and we will vote with our dollars to make those kinds of decisions, then that is how you make an impact. And I also know that these things are really hard to be mindful of. A lot of us weren't raised to be aware of these things. I know that I wasn't raised to be aware of where my clothes come from. I think that the most shocking moment for me was when my anthropology teacher called me out, or one of my anthropology professors, she called me out, said something about, I forget, but I answered a question, and she said, well, where do your clothes come from? I was like, I don't know, Malaysia. And she's like, so you're participating in people being oppressed, basically. And I was like, just answered a question, sis. Why are you throwing me under the bus like this? But she was right, and that was a moment that I will never forget how that made me feel, first of all. And 2, I was like, well, yeah, I am, crap. And I felt really bad about it. So, first of all, a lot of us aren't taught from a young age to think about that. So it's not often something that we're looking at automatically when we're shopping. But it should be. We can teach ourselves to do that. And also, it's really difficult when you're on a budget. It is so hard to be ethical and poor. I'm learning that the hard way right now. But educating yourself on what your purchases are contributing to, and then becoming mindful of purchasing more so based on what you need versus buying a ton of stuff just because you can. Those 2 things could be very helpful in changing our perception of clothing consumption and how we shop and how the fashion industry evolves moving forward. And I think that we could make some really important, some really critical changes to that if we as consumers become more mindful. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening. I so appreciate it. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at I've Been Thinking Pod. Make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you use to listen, so that way you don't miss out on anything new. And make sure that if you have Apple Podcasts, an iPhone, make sure you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And get excited for next week's episode. We are doing a Q&A with me in celebration of my birthday. So get ready for that. You won't want to miss it. All right, guys, thanks so much again for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I will talk at you next week, guys. Bye.
Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist and I'm an author of the book How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
Of all the kitchen hacks I know, Better Than Bouillon is my favorite. It's great for broth, of course, but you can also use Better Than Bouillon as a flavor enhancer. Just a spoonful adds so much flavor to stir fry, sauces, even marinades. Plus, they have reduced sodium and organic options, and the Culinary Collection, which includes amazing flavors like Italian herb and smoky chipotle. Make everything better with Better Than Bouillon. For free shipping on 2 or more jars, use code BETTER at betterthanbouillon.com.